So it is 12 o'clock and I am going to get started. At the moment, I don't have anybody on the call live with me, but if you check in, please let me know you're here. I am Dr. Jerry Novack, and today's 60-day challenge mindset topic is fierce self-compassion. So we're going to discuss a little bit about what is fierce self-compassion, and we'll start with just what is self-compassion, period. And then when we talk about what makes fierce self-compassion, and how does that compare to, say, more gentle self-compassion, and we will look into how to use these ideas of self-compassion to bolster our work toward our goals, to keep us on track. How do we use these ideas to our own benefit? I think some people will be surprised by self-compassion. My experience with this topic is that most folks that I encounter, and I'll say most folks in the United States, I don't know enough about other cultures. I haven't been as immersed to pass judgment, if you will, but I can pass judgment on my own culture. I'll say that in the United States, we sort of, we kind of poo-poo self-compassion. We think of it as softness or weakness, or we think that if we practice or demonstrate self-compassion, we will lose our edge, right? We think of it as soft. And that's not necessarily true. I'm going to hope to demonstrate to you that that's not necessarily the case. So let's talk about what self-compassion just in general, and the opposite of fierce. So if we think of it as like a family tree kind of thing, or like a diagram, right? At the top, you have self-compassion as a construct, as an idea. And then there's two branches from self-compassion. And one branch is what they call tender self-compassion, and the other branch is what's called fierce self-compassion. And again, I think many of the objections that people have to the idea of self-compassion come from the language. We don't like the idea of self-compassion, and we certainly don't like the idea of tender self-compassion. I do think, in my experience, that the notion of fierce self-compassion has gotten some people to listen, to raise an eyebrow, to understand. So let's start with just the idea, just the understanding of what is self-compassion. And perhaps the easiest way, or the best way to understand it, is to juxtapose it with self-criticism. So what does self-criticism look like? What does it sound like? If you have, let's keep it in a fitness realm, since we're doing this for the 60-day challenge at Lifetime Fitness. And let's say that in a fitness realm, you have decided you wanted to lose X number of pounds. Weight loss is a common goal. Lots of people have that goal. And it's one that's challenging for a lot of people. It eludes a lot of people. So let's say that's the goal. We want to lose 25 pounds or something. And we start in on a fitness program, and we start in on a nutritional program to help us achieve that goal. And for a couple of weeks, we do really well. Many of you may find yourself in this position right now. It's a few weeks into the 60-day challenge. I think we just passed 30 days, so we're just past the halfway point. And maybe we were really motivated in the beginning, and we had really good discipline, and we found that we were able to adhere pretty strictly to our fitness program and to our nutritional program. Now, I've got somebody joining. So let's see who is coming in. Brenda. Brenda Kane has joined me on the call. Hi, Brenda.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. It's not morning, it's afternoon now.
That's okay. So I was just introducing the topic for today, which is fierce self-compassion. And I was explaining that, Brenda's, I think she's having some connectivity issues. You still able to hear me, Brenda?
I can hear you.
Okay. So I was just explaining that fierce self-compassion is sort of a branch. If we think about like a diagram or a tree, at the top, we have the idea of self-compassion, and then there's two branches, and there's what they call tender self-compassion and fierce self-compassion. I was explaining that very often the folks I talk to, um, especially in our culture, in our society, tend to like turn their nose up at the idea of self-compassion. We think of it as weakness or softness. I think we have to be hard on ourselves, and that self-compassion will make us lose our edge. And so there's research and science that demonstrates that that's not the case. So I was just about to get into the idea of what is self-compassion, and the idea of self-compassion is maybe the best way to understand it is that it is the opposite of self-criticism. And so the example I was sort of setting up when you dialed in is, many of us, it's in the fitness world anyway, it's pretty common that people have weight loss goals, right? In this 60-day challenge, maybe a handful of people have this idea that they want to lose 15 or 20 or 25 pounds, something like that. And maybe initially, when they first set that goal and started on a fitness program and a nutritional program, they're pretty disciplined about it, right? They're motivated and they really want to get this goal. And so they're pretty consistent about getting into the gym. They're pretty consistent about their eating. But as time goes on, things start to get in the way, and we have to maybe miss a workout or two, or we go out and attend an event. We attend a wedding or go out to dinner with some friends and eat off of our program, right? The self-critic tends to, the voice in our head that's the self-critic tends to say, oh God, what an idiot. I can't believe I did this. I'm never going to meet this goal. I don't know why I screw this up time and time again, right? And I'm so undisciplined. If I were just more disciplined, I would have, stayed with my goals and not eaten off my program or not skipped a workout, right? And it's very sort of judgmental. Many of us probably have that voice, right? As I'm saying those things, I don't know if the words are exact, but the tone should be familiar probably to a lot of people, right? Self-compassion, I think a lot of people make the assumption that self-compassion is just willy-nilly letting ourselves off the hook. Oh, it's okay that we ate off our program. You're fine. You're fine as you are. You don't need to lose that weight. You don't need to get into better physical shape. You don't need to, right? But that's not self-compassion. That's not what that is. If it were, no one would ever achieve anything, right? So what self-compassion looks like is that when we deviate from our plan, when we are undisciplined, when we have a moment of weakness, the way we bounce back, the way we respond to that with self-compassion is to say, okay, you goofed, you screwed it up, right? That's true. But everyone screws up. That's human, right? You were really disciplined for several weeks, and that was great. And now you goofed. And so, okay, everyone goofs once in a while. Let's figure out how to steer our way back into the program, right? There's no, you're so stupid, you're so weak, you're so undisciplined. It's just an idea of, a concept that is very closely related to self-compassion is a concept. In fact, if you look at self-compassion as a domain, it breaks down into a few subdomains. And one of those subdomains is what's called common humanity. And it's to what degree do we treat ourselves the way we would treat any other human being, right? Any other human being who started off on a fitness and nutrition program and did really well and was very disciplined for a month or 6 weeks or something, and then had a moment of weakness and ate some junk or skipped a workout or whatever, we wouldn't chastise that person, right? We also wouldn't necessarily say to that person, well, there's no need for you to get in better shape, or especially if they were having health problems, right? The honest answer that we would approach that person with is like, no, your fitness goals, your health goals are important, and you should pursue them. And it's okay that you had a moment of weakness, right? That happens to everyone. And so, okay, you fell off the plan a little bit, and let's set a strategy for getting back onto our plan, right? And for some reason, when it comes to other people, that idea of common humanity, we all get it. We understand it. Most of us agree that that's the way to approach it. When it comes to how we talk to ourselves, we defend the need to be brutal on ourselves. We defend it with like, no, if I'm too soft on myself, I won't be disciplined. If I'm too easy on myself, I'll lose my edge, right? But the research doesn't support that idea, right? For those of us who have raised kids, we know that like if your kid suddenly starts to bring home bad grades, right? The parent who calls your kid names, what are you, stupid? You can't do the work? What's the matter with you, right? Is not going to be as effective as the parent who sits down and goes, okay, listen, I get that school's boring. I thought it was boring when I was in school too. I understand. But it's still important that you get decent grades because it's going to make your future easier, right? It's going to help you out in the future. And so let's find a plan. Let's figure out how we get back on track. How can you make up some missed assignments or get some extra credit? And we all know that that parent, or most of us anyway, should know that that parent is going to have better success with their child than the one who screams and yells and says, what are you, an idiot, right? So let's talk about some of the research that supports this. The study that for me is most eye-opening about self-compassion is a study. I forget what university it was, what university this study was conducted, but it was one of the Ivies. It was Stanford or Harvard or Yale. It was a school where you have to be pretty smart to get into that school, right? So most of the kids who attend I think maybe it was Stanford. Most of the kids who attend Stanford recognize that they are, above average in terms of school performance, right? And what they did for this study is they split them into groups. One group, I forget what the control group was, but the two experimental groups, one group, what they did was they gave all of these students a vocabulary test, but it was an impossibly difficult vocabulary test. It was a test that was intended for them to fail, right?
Okay.
And one group, and what they were told after they failed this test is that they would get an opportunity to take the test again in 2 weeks, right? Or 3 weeks or whatever. So here you have all these above average smart kids who are really good in school. You give them a test that they are all designed to fail. And you tell them that they can take the test again in a few weeks. One group is coached on self-compassion. They're taught how to talk to themselves, and they're encouraged to practice common humanity, to say, listen, I know I'm smart. I got into this really hard school. I get really good grades. This test was really difficult. Maybe I need to prepare for it differently, or maybe I didn't study correctly, but everyone fails a test once in a while, and it's not the end of the world, right? It's not great. I don't want to fail, but it's not the end of the world, and I'll study and I'll retake it, right? And then the other group, so in modern research, you are not allowed to coach a group to be self-critical because it's considered harmful. You're not allowed, it's unethical in research to coach people that treat themselves badly, right? But the assumption was if we gave them no coaching at all, if we just left them alone, most of them were probably going to be pretty self-critical, right? And so that's what the researchers did. With one group, they coached them in self-compassion. With the other group, they gave them no coaching with the assumption that they would be pretty self-critical.
Yeah.
And then they monitored their behavior for the next several weeks, and they looked at their scores on the second vocabulary test. And what they found was that the group that was coached on self-compassion studied much, much harder for the next exam, and then performed way better than the group that received no coaching at all.
Okay.
So the reason for that is that when we are self-critical and when we are tough on ourselves, right? And when I say tough on ourselves, I'm not talking about having high standards. You should have high standards for yourself. I'm talking about brutal criticism, right? I'm talking about the kind of tough on yourself that says, God, I'm such an idiot. I'm so stupid. Why do I let that happen? Why am I so weak? Why can't I stay on my diet? God, why am I so undisciplined, right? Though that's the kind of tough I'm talking about, right? It's okay to have high standards, but this sort of very critical approach, what happens is it creates a sense of shame, because what I'm doing is I'm really attacking my own character, my own personality, right? I'm not saying, hey, everyone fails an exam once in a while. I'm saying I'm weak.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dumb. I don't know how to study. I don't know how to stay on my diet. I don't know how to stay on my fitness program, right? And so now what happens is for these kids who are taking the test is every time they would sit down to study, it would remind them of their failure, and it would remind them of how dumb they are. It would remind them. And so they were really not motivated to study more because they were riddled in shame. And so by being riddled in shame, we want to avoid. And so the students who were really self-critical studied less for the follow-up exam, because every time they would open the book to study, it would remind them of how dumb they were and how bad they did and how. But the kids who were coached in self-compassion, the kids who were taught to say things like, well, I'm clearly smart because I got into this good school, and everyone fails an exam once in a while. And if I just prepare, if I work harder for the next one, I'll definitely do better. Those kids didn't feel the sense of shame when they went to prepare for the follow-up exam. And so they were much more motivated to study harder and to come up with new study strategies and to employ new strategies. And so this research study has been replicated in different populations using different tasks. It's not always a vocabulary test, but over and over and over again, what we find is that the people who practice self-compassion work harder when we fail, because we are more willing to look at our errors and say, okay, we goofed, and everyone goofs once in a while, and how do I make it right? Whereas the people who are very self-critical don't like to look at their errors. They become defensive about their errors. And, if they fell off their fitness plan, they're more likely to blame work, to blame their family, to blame how busy they are, than they are to just say, okay, everybody falls off once in a while. How do I get back? So therein is the value of self-compassion, right, in general. So what is meant by fierce? Well, let me pause right there. And since Brenda's on the call, I'm going to check in with you, Brenda. Does any of that sound familiar? Do you have any experience or thoughts or ideas?
Yeah, I think I try to use self-compassion because it encourages me. It's like myself encouraging me to do
Right.
better, to go
Okay.
on, or to make a change. If I like get off the wagon, like during this time, it's I encourage myself to look at, okay, what was the cause? What do I need to do different, or what can I do different the next time? If it's during like exercising, um, my biggest one that I've been doing this week is just standing there with going up the step, and um, that one, like sometimes I kind of get wobbly. I encourage myself, and I notice with encouraging myself, then the next couple of steps, I'm on target.
Okay. So
So
Brenda, yeah, so Brenda's saying, I'm streaming on a different service too, so I'm gonna, so Brenda's saying that she does typically practice self-compassion and that she finds that when she is, you know, kind to herself and less critical, that she's able to be self-encouraging, and that encouragement helps her stay on track. It helps her to be consistent and persistent with what she's doing. The example she provided was there's a particular exercise in the gym that's been a challenge for her, and that when she's encouraging to herself about it, when she allows it to be difficult but encourages herself to continue trying or working, that she finds it gets a little bit easier in the next few rounds. Um, so there's your experience with self-compassion. Do you have some experience in moments where you've been a little more self-critical and how that's gone?
um, I can't necessarily say that I've been more critical of myself, but thinking in education, I've seen where parents, and it's not me, parents have been really critical with their children, say they did really bad on a test. And so the parent is bopping those kids and
Yeah.
just tearing them apart. Those kids aren't encouraged, and it doesn't encourage them to do better. But the
Right.
ones that, like you said, have more compassion, I think they are teaching their children compassion, and they do better the next time, and it encourages them to do better. The ones that are beat up, it's like it's almost like they want to give up.
Yeah. So Brenda was saying she has some experience as a teacher, and her experience with as in teaching is that the parents who are very like brutally hard on their kids if they don't do well on an exam or don't turn in an assignment, those kids don't seem to improve. Whereas the kids who are treated with some compassion and the parents approach it in a way of like, okay, everyone struggles with school sometimes, but let's get you back on track. Those kids seem to do much better. So what I will say is, I think when I introduce the idea of self-compassion, people very often, whether it's in the gym as a trainer talking to people, um, or whether it was in my career as a psychologist working with clients in the psychology office, um, people didn't want to pursue self-compassion because they thought it would make them soft, it would make them weak. Using the education example, uh, if somebody fails an exam and you respond with, oh, that's okay to fail exams, like you're fine, that's not compassion. That's neglect, right? And so what I'm championing here, what I'm recommending is not self-neglect, right? If you have gotten out of shape and you're not in good physical condition and maybe you have some health issues related to that, whether it's heart problems or blood pressure or blood sugar, diabetes, that kind of thing. um, Self-compassion is not saying to yourself, oh no, I'm good as I am, I can leave this alone, I'm fine. That's not compassion, that's neglect, right? Self-compassion says, I love myself and care about myself, therefore my health is a priority. And the fact that I've gotten out of shape or the fact that I've gotten into some health issues doesn't make me a less valuable human being. It doesn't make me an awful person. It just means I need to address it. That's self-compassion. That's working with compassion, right? If I'm, you know, if I'm your physician, if I'm your doctor, and we do some blood work and we find out that you're pre-diabetic, and I tell you what an awful human being you are for letting yourself get that way,
Yeah.
that's cruel. If I tell you that you're pre-diabetic, but it's fine, you can, that's okay, that's neglectful. What a compassionate doctor will do is explain that your A1C is high and you have this blood sugar issue, which is makes you pre-diabetic, and that it's okay. Like, we live in a culture where there's a lot of processed food and there's a lot of physical comfort, right? We have a lot of technology and things. And so we're not as physical as we once were. Our food is not as high quality as it once was. And so it's easy to become pre-diabetic, but with a little bit of effort and with a little bit of physical fitness and a little bit of attention to our nutrition, we can correct this problem. That's compassion, right? So I think people often mistake compassion for neglect. It is absolutely 100% not the idea that everything is fine as it is, there's no need to change anything. It's just the fact that the things we need to change do not detract from our worth and value as a human being. So that said, what is the difference between fierce compassion, fierce self-compassion, and what's called tender self-compassion? So very simply, the difference is that tender self-compassion tends to be passive, whereas fierce self-compassion tends to be more active. So the way we talk to ourselves in our mind is an example of tender self-compassion, right? Saying to yourself, okay, I didn't get to the gym at all this week, but everybody falls off once in a while, and I'm really committed to these goals. So I'm going to make a schedule for this coming week, and I'm going to make sure that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm at the gym. That's tender self-compassion. Fierce self-compassion would be that on Monday you get to the gym, and then on Wednesday you were planning to go to the gym at noon, and your friend invites you out to lunch, and you respond to your friend by saying, I'd love to go to lunch, but I actually have plans for Wednesday. Can we pick another day? You're setting a boundary, right? That no, I'm not going to, I would love to see you. I'd love to have lunch with you, but I'm not going to allow it to knock me off my fitness goal, right? I'm going to make sure I get to the gym. And so I set this boundary and I enforce this boundary, right? Setting boundaries is one thing, enforcing them is a whole nother thing. And that's fierce self-compassion. It's active in the interest of protecting my goals. Okay. I find I struggle with this a lot because my kids are a big priority for me. But I have other things that are important to me, like getting to the gym, like going to train jujitsu. I'm a member of BACA, which is Bikers Against Child Abuse, which requires me to go and do things on the weekend sometimes, when it means I'm going to be away from my kids. And so I have to figure out the balance between demonstrating to my children that they're a priority by taking them to do things together, by spending time with them, by helping them with homework, by showing up for their sporting events and their competitions, but also setting boundaries with them that says, no, BACA is really important to me. And I do have conversations with my kids where I explain to them that the most important thing we can do, in my opinion, is to help others in need. And that's what I do in BACA, is I help other kids in need. So I say to my children, I would love to spend the whole day with you. You're my favorite people in the world, but sometimes we make sacrifices to help others who are in need. And so I'm going to sacrifice some of my time with you, and I'm going to ask you to sacrifice some of your time with me so that I can go help these kids. And then when I come back, maybe we'll all go to the movies. or we'll all go get ice cream or something. And so I'm demonstrating fierce self-compassion by drawing the boundary that says like, no, that my involvement in this organization fulfills me and is important to me. And so that means that sometimes I'm going to be called away, not always, but sometimes I'll be called away to do some of the things that are required. So is that making sense, Brenda, the difference between tender self-compassion and fierce self-compassion?
Yeah, yeah, I see that with a tender self-compassion, it's making the plan, but the fierce one is following through and
Yes.
staying on track.
Yeah, so Brenda was saying that the tender self-compassion is making the plan, and the fierce one is the behaviors that keep the plan on track, the actions. And that's true, but there can be more to it in some circumstances. So for example, if you have had a heck of a week and you are feeling beat up and abused and exhausted from your week, sometimes tender self-compassion can look like sitting in a hot bath with some Epsom salt and listening to quiet music and, closing the door and having an hour to yourself, right? Fierce self-compassion can look like sitting down with your date book and figuring out the next week so it is less brutal than this week was. Do you see the distinction there? Does that make as much sense? Oh, I think you're frozen, Brenda. So the idea is that like they don't always have to be connected. They can be. So in the instance where you decided you're not going to miss your time at the gym anymore, the tender self-compassion is telling yourself it's okay that you fell off your program a little bit, but that you are committed to getting back on that program, and then setting a plan to do so, right? I'm going to get to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday at my lunch break, and I'm going to stick to that, is the tender self-compassion piece. The fierce, I think I lost Brenda. The fierce self-compassion piece is when your friend, contacts you and says, hey, let's go for lunch on Wednesday and have a midday, mimosa or whatever. And you say, yeah, I'd love to do that with you, but can we do that on Saturday? Because I already have plans on Wednesday, and you stick to your gym schedule. In that instance, those two are related, right? One was about making the plan and one was about enforcing the plan. They don't have to be related. Right, the tender self-compassion can be, getting to the end of a really tough week and saying to yourself, writing in a journal and being like, I'm proud of me for getting through this week. It was really hard, and I think a lot of other people might have. Oh, Brenda's back. Hey, Brenda, welcome back.
Sorry,
That's
my
okay.
phone got too hot.
Yeah, it's okay, no problem. So what I was explaining is that in some instances, the tender self-compassion, the fierce self-compassion are absolutely related, the way you were saying, right? One was making the plan, gee, I fell off my fitness program last week. I only got to the gym once, and I really want to be committed to these goals. So I'm going to make a plan to go Monday, Wednesday, Friday at my lunch break, and I'm going to stick to it. And it's okay. Everybody falls off their goals once in a while, but it just demonstrates to me that I need to recommit myself to it. That's the tender self-compassion for sure. When your friend calls and says, hey, let's go out for lunch and let's, on Wednesday and maybe we'll have a drink and whatever. The fierce self-compassion is establishing the boundary and saying, I'd love to do that, but can we do it on Thursday or on Saturday because I already have plans on Wednesday? And then sticking to your gym commitment is the fierce self-compassion. The point I was making when you called back in is that they don't always have to be connected like that. So in the instance where maybe you've had a really brutal week and you're feeling really tough, the tender self-compassion can look like sitting in a hot bubble bath and relaxing. It could look like writing in your journal and saying things in your journal like, well, I'm really proud of myself for getting through this week with a little bit of grace and a little bit of, right? It was a super tough week. And I think maybe in the past I would have fallen apart, had a meltdown or something, but I really was able to hold myself together this week, and I'm proud of myself for that, right? That's tender self-compassion, right? Fierce self-compassion is saying, okay, this coming week I'm gonna omit a few things so that I have left fewer commitments, and I can, relax more, or I can balance my week more between the things that really are important to me that I want to accomplish versus the things that, distract me, my attention in other directions. I'm reminded, as I say that, I'm reminded of a podcast I listened to once. It was about productivity, not about self-compassion, but they were interviewing, the podcast hosts were interviewing the guy who wrote a book called The One Thing. And the book, The One Thing, is about whittling down your priorities and your goals to the absolute one thing that's driving them, because that's what keeps you on track, right? And what this guy was saying is that, and the reason I'm thinking of it is because what he does in his life is absolutely an act of fierce self-compassion. What he said is he no longer reads emails. He has hired someone. He's at the point where he makes enough money where he has hired someone who reads all his emails for him. And that person, I mean, they probably do other things too, but part of their job is to read his emails and decide which things do require his attention and send those on to him, and just delete the others or give them a quick response. And his rationale, his reason for that is, he said there's 0 things in his email. There's not a single thing in his email based on his priorities. When he reads his email, 100% of his emails are what other people want from him. 0% has to do with his priorities. And so he talked about, like, if you're a person who wakes up in the morning, gets out of bed and grabs their phone and checks their emails, the first moments of your day are inundated with what other people want from you. And you're already not on track toward your priorities because you're responding to what other people want from you. So while that's a great, strategy, it also strikes me as an act of fierce self-compassion. He's putting processes in place actively to protect his time and his energy. So I'm hoping that makes some sense, helps illustrate. Yeah. The last piece I want to touch on about self-compassion as a whole, whether it's tender self-compassion or fierce self-compassion, doesn't matter. But I do, in my perspective, the way I look at it, there's a strong relationship, a big connection between self-compassion and mindset. So people who are familiar with Carol Dweck and her work on mindset, there's a growth mindset and there's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset believes that with effort, we can improve at virtually anything, right? A fixed mindset believes that we have a certain capacity for things and that it's fixed, it doesn't move, and so effort is useless, right? So for example, if you're not good at math, there's no sense in working on math because you're just not good at it. And what happens is people who have a growth mindset, if they're not good at math and they get some math problems to do, they might be interested in the challenge. They might like that it's a challenge. They get to stretch their boundaries. They get to be better at it, right? They get to do better at it. And if they do some things wrong in these math problems and a math teacher comes and gives them some feedback, they actually welcome the feedback because they want to improve. And so they like having the feedback, right? If they want to learn to sing and they're not a very good singer, and they go and take some singing lessons, and that's exciting to them. They like to be a beginner. It's fun to learn new things. And if the singing instructor gives them some feedback on things they can do better, they embrace the feedback. People have a fixed mindset, say things like, no, I don't sing, I'm not good at it. Right.
Yeah.
And to them, trying a new thing, trying something like that feels like a threat. It feels like it's threatening to expose their weaknesses. And because they don't believe that they can improve, that they can get better, they want to avoid those things that expose their weaknesses. Right? They only want challenges that they know that they can master. Right? If they're if they like to play chess, for example, they'll only play chess against people they know they can beat. Right? They feel threatened by the challenge of playing chess against somebody who's much, much better than they are. Right? And they tend to get defensive with feedback. Right? If somebody provides them feedback, they see it as a threat against their, who they are, and they need to defend, right, what they know. I can tell you for this reason. So I have trained in various martial arts for 40 years. I am by no means the greatest martial artist on the planet. I am by no means the greatest martial artist in Colorado Springs. I am by no means, right? I'm just a guy who's done it for a long time, and I'm better than some people and not as good as others. Now, every once in a while at the gym where I work, I see people working out on the heavy bag, boxing or kickboxing or whatever. And it's clear to me that they could use some help, right? That their technique is not great. But I have stopped offering help to people who don't ask, because what tends to happen with people who have a fixed mindset is I say to them, hey, can I give you a tip or a pointer? And they immediately need to prove to me how much they know. Well, I studied with this guy and I trained under this master and I have a black belt in this or a brown belt in that. And it's like, well, okay, like as good as you are right now is as good as you're ever going to be. Right? Somebody with a growth mindset, if I said, hey, can I help you with the, technique on the bag, would say, sure. And if I provided them feedback about how to improve and my feedback was good, they would integrate it into what they already know. If I was providing them feedback and in so doing demonstrated that I actually don't know as much as they do, like maybe they know something, right? They would still take the feedback. And if there was anything to be gleaned from it, they take it. And if not, okay, they press on. And so I think that self-compassion is connected to this idea of mindset, right? People who are brutal on themselves, who don't practice self-compassion, are more likely to have a fixed mindset, right? The way Carol Dweck describes mindset in her book, when we talk about things like singing, for example, right, is the idea of a growth mindset is, okay, you may never be good enough to sing at Carnegie Hall, but with practice, you can be better tomorrow than you are today.
Right.
Right. And the people with the fixed mindset tend to say, well, I'll never be good enough to sing at Carnegie Hall, so why bother? The people with the growth mindset say, okay, I'll never sing at Carnegie Hall, but let's see how good I can get. Let's try. And so in order to do that, in order to be willing to do that, and maybe even, practice out loud if you're not very good, you have to have enough self-compassion to say, well, lots of people don't sing well. It's fine. Like, I'm just going to work on it. So in order to sort of wrap this up into a tidy conclusion, what I'm suggesting is that folks go and learn more about self-compassion, especially about fierce self-compassion, and how it can apply to all of your life goals, not just your fitness goals, but for the purposes of this conversation, how it can apply to your fitness goals. And if you learn more about it and start to practice it, right? The idea, certainly you can have short-term goals, right? You could have the goal of competing in a bikini contest or something, or a bodybuilding contest in 6 months from now, right? And sure, you can really sort of bulldoze toward that goal. But beyond that goal, most of us are trying to create a lifestyle of well-being, right? A lifestyle of health and fitness and nutrition and well-being. And in any lifestyle, it's going to ebb and flow, right? You can talk to whoever your favorite musician is, right? Whoever the best piano player, guitar player, whatever, and they will tell you there have been times in their life when they have wanted to throw the piano out the window, right? There have been times in their life where they took a little break from it. They had to get away from it for a month. And then there's other times when they're reinvigorated. This ebb and flow is normal. And so same thing with fitness, right? If you talk to, Lou Ferrigno or whatever, he will tell you, Lou Ferrigno at 70 years old is still in great shape. He looks, for those who don't know, he was competing with Arnold Schwarzenegger for Mr. Olympia. He was a professional bodybuilder, and then for a while had some fame playing the Incredible Hulk on television in the 70s. He was the Hulk. And Lou Ferrigno still is a monster. He's in great shape. And what he will tell you is that, consistently over the course of his lifetime, he has lifted weights and exercised and watched what he ate. I would bet good money that Lou Ferrigno would also tell you that there were points in his life where he was a little less disciplined than he could have been. And then there were other points where he was more motivated and engaged. And so treating yourself with some compassion in those instances where you're a little less disciplined will enable you, it will empower you to develop a growth mindset and to re-engage with your goals in a meaningful way. The same way the kids at Stanford University who practice self-compassion studied harder than the kids who didn't, right? So use fierce self-compassion, sit down on Sunday night with your weekly planner and decide which days you're going to be in the gym. Do a little bit of meal planning. If you like to have one or two sort of cheat meals during the week where you can have a dessert or have a few drinks or whatever, then figure out what days you're going to have those, and then put processes in place to protect them. And I recommend two processes. The first is a process by which you can defend your gym time and your nutrition time. So, my gym times are Monday, Wednesday, Friday at my lunch break, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday after work, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning, or whatever they are. And you have some process in place by which if something threatens to infringe on that time, you can defend it. You can do those things another time, or you can pass that responsibility off to somebody else, or so that you can still get to the gym and do your thing. If you decide that Wednesday and Saturday are the days of the week when you have dessert after dinner and you get some ice cream or whatever, and somebody invites you out on a Thursday, then you can either go out on a Thursday but eat within your nutrition plan, or you can ask them to join you on Wednesday or Saturday, which are your 2 days. So that's the first thing I encourage. The second is to have a plan B, right? If I'll talk as a parent. If I plan Monday, Wednesday, Friday are my workout days, and on Wednesday I have a kid homesick from school, maybe I can work out in my garage. I have some equipment at home. But if I can't, if my kid needs my attention, then plan B has to be to move my Wednesday workout to Thursday. And so instead of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I did Monday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And if, my dessert days are Wednesday and Saturday, and somebody invites me out for Thursday, but it's a close friend and it's their birthday, and I'm definitely going to have some birthday cake, then I just forego my Wednesday dessert, right? And to even it out. These are simple examples. Life gets more complicated than that. But if you start thinking about it simply, you will gradually develop the ability to better handle the more complex situations. If you start with the complex situations, you're going to feel probably overwhelmed. So I would say start simply. The last piece of that is if you do have your dessert on Wednesday and your friend hits you up at the last minute and says, oh yeah, tomorrow's my birthday, come out and celebrate with me, and you don't want to deny that. And so you go out with them and you have dessert again on Thursday. But then on Saturday, you had plans to go out for ice cream with your family. You don't want to disappoint them. So you go out and now you've had 3 desserts instead of 2. Show yourself some compassion. That one dessert is not going to undo all of your progress. It's not going to undo your whole plan. What will undo your whole plan is if you get angry at yourself and say, God, I'm so undisciplined. Why am I so bad at this? Everything always gets in the way. I can never, stick to my plan. And then you stop doing it altogether. That will derail you. If you can look at yourself and say, I planned for only 2 desserts this week, but there was an unexpected circumstance and I ended up having 3. And it's okay, that happens, I get it, right? Like that's life sometimes. And I just need to get back on my plan. Believe it or not, you don't even have to deny yourself a dessert next week to make up for it. You can just go back to your 2 a week and everything will even out and it will be fine. As long as you treat yourself with some common humanity and with some self-compassion. So I want to say thank you to Brenda for joining me live on the call. And for those who are going to watch this, I will post this up on YouTube and share a link to it. So anybody who's watching it later, thank you for investing the time in it. And please, by all means, do some Googling, search up self-compassion. You will find a woman named Dr. Kristen Neff. She's sort of the self-compassion guru. But read a little bit about it, experiment with it in your life, even if you don't believe the things I've said, and find me in the gym or message me, hit me up somewhere, and let me know what your experiences have been. I hope it helps you all stay committed to your goals. So thanks.
Hey,
Have a
thanks.
great rest of your Sunday, Brenda.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.